Today I'm speaking to a top leading expert in narcissism. She's had 30 years of experience in working with both narcissists and their partners. This was so fascinating to me. I learned so much, and there are very few reliable sources of information on this today. It's a very popularized topic, I feel like, and so I was really excited to speak to Wendy. Besides the fact that she's so incredibly kind and generous and genuine, it was fascinating to learn what it's like for her to work with narcissists, what works to actually shift narcissism, which is fascinating, and how can we cope in these relationships and how can we leave them. So this is a good one. Let's dive in there. So hi, Wendy. I'm extremely excited to dive into narcissism with you.
Thanks, Marina. I'm really excited to be with you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What has led you to this topic?
It goes way back. So we're talking about probably more than 30 years now, when I was in the early phases of development alongside Dr. Jeffrey Young, who founded Schema Therapy in Manhattan. And I was finding myself very triggered by this particular type of client and really rather curious about my own reactions when there was a narcissistic person in the room. You know, a lot of shrinking and giving in and giving up and feeling overwhelmed. And I was surprised, I was surprised and I was curious. And so I sort of became assigned the role of narcissism expert in our little, think tank, our little bubble. It was figure out how to adapt the model together with the team and with Jeff, of course, figure out how to adapt the model so that it might be effective in working with this population. But let's also figure out what we do to sturdy ourselves, because so much of this is also about therapist sturdiness, to be able to work in the ways that we work in schema therapy, which means being very active and very real. So it's been an exciting journey, and I've been working with this population and with those offended by this population for a long time.
Wow, that is so fascinating. And I mean, 30 years. Would you agree with the idea that it's now like so mainstream to talk about narcissism much more than it used to be?
Yeah, too much so, I think, right?
That's what I wanted to ask you. How do you feel about that?
Not great, because I think, the internet is flooded with this word. When I wrote the first edition of my book, there were a handful of books for the general audience, general reader, on this topic. A lot of books in the clinical world, but not many books for a general reader. About, I don't know, several years later, I wrote the second edition of the book. There were a lot more books on the topic. And then by my recent third edition, which was a few years ago, thousands, countless numbers of books with the title of Narcissism. And unsurprisingly, right? I mean, for everything from, political figures to celebrities to, your neighbor, it was happening now around the kitchen table. And to some degree, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing because I'm a big believer that the more you understand narcissism, the greater the opportunity to really emancipate yourself from any of the dangers of, falling into the self-blame, self-doubt trap that can happen when you're in a relationship with them. So I think knowledge is power in this regard, and knowledge creates a nice pathway to empathy, understanding, and the ability to be a good advocate for yourself when you're dealing with someone like this. But the internet is flooded with a lot of mythology too. I think what we see on the internet is often not necessarily narcissism, but might be psychopathy, sociopath, antisocial behaviors, more extreme forms, more malevolence, more menacing types of. And it's not that this doesn't happen with people who also have narcissistic features, but that's not typical of narcissism.
Can you share the difference and also what are really the myths to pay attention to for the general public?
Yeah, I mean, with narcissism, you're thinking about someone. I mean, there's a little more than two, but basically two primary forms that we see. One is this sort of classic, larger than life, all about me, grandiose, we would say, grandiose or overt type of narcissist, beating the chest and master of the universe and all of that. Often they've developed a pretty good self-esteem over time because they're often in positions of leadership or prestigious positions. They've acquired a lot. Even though I would say, having worked with these types, deep down, they share a similar kind of loneliness and insecurity that the other type, what we call the covert, more fragile, more lonely or vulnerable narcissists have. What they all have is a high degree of entitlement, a low degree of empathy. And, at the higher end of the spectrum, because everything happens along a spectrum, you're going to find those who can be exploitative and coercive and even abusive and dangerous when you get into more what we used to call malignant forms, severe forms of narcissism. And then at the lower end, you have, the obnoxious, never stops talking about himself or herself type as well.
How did you learn to be working with narcissists as a therapist? Like what were, I think we can learn so much even as empathetic people dealing with narcissists from you, like from your experience.
A lot of it goes back to, again, my work in schema therapy. We look for patterns. So I always like to say my clients teach me a lot. They teach me how to be a good therapist, how to be effective, and they help me to spot my mistakes. And when you're working in a model that is very much built around meeting unmet emotional needs, looking at early life narratives, looking at how these schemas or life traits develop in the body and the mind and the brain, we see, that really at the core there are a lot of insufficient the needs were not met adequately. And that these are not demons, not devils, not run for your life, it's Satan, not someone who could never be helped, which the internet is always pushing, but someone who's highly, impaired, that also has a story, that has dealt with it by using these coping modes or narcissistic modes as ways of survival. And this becomes a habit over time. And it becomes self-defeating over time, but they can't see it, right? They get very kind of locked into this way of being. I'm not saying that I feel sorry for them. People will say, Wendy's so soft and, compassionate. It's not about being soft and compassionate. I feel compassion for the suffering, vulnerable parts of them, the little child underneath. But I do hold them accountable. They are responsible for their actions. They do hurtful things. They betray, they abuse, they control, they dominate. They gaslight or distort reality. And so they are accountable for that. And as I often say, it's not your fault that you are the way you are, but it is your responsibility, if you want to be responsible, to work on this. I've learned a lot from them about the power of being very real in the treatment room and the power of, again, the more you know, the more you can craft your empathic prelude to any confrontation, because they do need to be confronted a lot, whether it's for setting limits or calling out, an observable pattern, getting them to stop and think, getting them to see. But when you use empathy, meaning, I'm not saying you're the bad guy, but, that was a pretty hurtful statement. So it's about the clarity of empathy, which is not feeling sorry for someone, but really understanding someone, really getting it, even if you don't endorse it, even if you don't support it, even if you don't agree with them. And most of the time I don't agree with them, but I can understand how they do what they do. So when people say, can you believe that? I say, of course I can believe that.
It makes sense.
It's a classic narcissistic pattern.
Would you say that when you look at the adult narcissist, not the child parts and how that developed, it's more of like mental empathy, like I understand how they got there rather than you're feeling it in your body?
Yes. I think that it's what we call building the conceptual framework. So you're building an understanding of this profile in front of you. It's hard not to think about the early life, how A led to B, led to C, led to D, right? But, and when you're focused on the child part, I think there's more emotional engagement, more somatic engagement. You're feeling it, right? It's like watching a movie. It's like, oh, you're aching for this child who is neglected or burdened or suffering. And then you watch them grow and, well, okay, it's making sense that they turned into this individual who is now betraying a partner, has become a bit of a con artist, isn't telling the truth, is very controlling, is very detached. So it starts to make sense to us, but it's not in your gut anymore, right?
Yeah, because I find like when I've personally dealt with when I get overly compassionate in my body for someone like that, I can lose the responsibility aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's a danger for partners too. I mean, a lot of partners who are deeply loving, caring, compassionate people, also empathic people. My my question is always, but at what cost to you? At what cost? So it's lovely that you are a lovely human, who cares so deeply, who can be forgiving, who can see the map, and you can see how one thing became another. But what about you? What about your needs? What about your identity? What about your rights? What is the price you're paying for that? So again, empathy is different than sympathy. Empathy is different than compassion. And I push a lot for empathic understanding and awareness and even attunement here. You can feel it. That doesn't mean you have to get hijacked into giving up yourself and giving up your own power.
So when we look at the trauma responses, when you were speaking, this came to me. I'm curious. I often talk about fawn and fix as trauma responses. Do you think that narcissistic behavior has like its own trauma response, or is it more fitting into the standard, fight, flight, probably fight, I'm guessing?
It's mostly fight, flight. They are very much what we call in my work, the overcompensators. So everything from Mr. or Ms. I use the male pronoun a lot only because I've worked primarily with men, but there's plenty of divas out there too. Um, it's usually fight, Mr. Entertainer, the charming, the I'll show you, the bully and attack, the entitled, a lot of overcompensating, and as well as detaching. What we see flight through this kind of detached, self-soothing, self-stimulating way of being. So they get excessively preoccupied with things that are stimulating. It's another way of not feeling their loneliness and insecurity, which is why they get into a lot of trouble with hypersexuality and sex addictions and gambling and drugs and all kinds of things, even just, internet spending, workaholism, and just shutting the door behind them and not really engaging in the emotional world.
In what situations do you tell people to leave a narcissist? And are there situations where you would tell them to stay, and how would they cope with that?
I never tell anyone to leave or stay. What I say is, let's look at the options. And I mean, that's not true. Let me take that back. I might strongly push for leaving if there's danger, if there's violence, if there's unsafety, especially for the individual and if they have children, in fact. So I would be it would be very hard for me not to say, this is my bias and this is my fear and you are not safe.
Does that include emotional abuse?
Not necessarily. It depends on the individual. And again, is it driving them to the brink where they are becoming so depressed they are not functioning, they're suicidal? So we have to really look at, are they able to still think on their feet? Are they able to still care for themselves? Again, it's the cost. What is the cost? But more, the higher the volatility, the greater the chances of danger. And so we think about always safety first, right? Whether it's self-harm or harm coming from the narcissist. I work with lots of people who stay. And I don't judge anybody for the decisions they make, because I understand that there may be children to protect, and the fear that if I'm not here to supervise my children, narcissists are notoriously, entitled. So kids are fine. Why do they need a seatbelt? Kids are fine. What's the big deal if they're eating candy? You're such a worrier. Kids are fine. So they're looking at the iPad all day. I'm busy, right? It's hard sometimes for that separation to occur when your children might become collateral damage. At the same time, I understand when someone says, I can't do it anymore. I've got to get out. I've got to go now. I know this is going to be hard. I know it's going to be harder to keep an eye on the kids, but I can't do it. And I say, I'm right with you. I'm with you if you stay. I'm with you if you go. We will work on a way for you to carve out a life for yourself and make it work. There will be a lot of grief. There will be hardship. We know vengeance is a big thing when it comes to divorcing a narcissist if you're married and you're divorcing. So it's more about support than really telling someone what to do. I will be honest with them if I have met the narcissistic partner and they will not engage in therapy and they are at the more severe end of the spectrum. I will be very honest to say, this isn't going to change. So you are looking at your tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day, with the chances of it getting worse.
What have you seen in terms of healing for the narcissist? Like, what are the conditions that make it more likely? And can you share some stories? Like, is it something that sort of, I would guess, always stays there, but maybe they cope with it better? Like, they have more strategies?
It's a great question, Marina. And I think we have to think about our humanness, right? We all have a memory. And anyone who knows me knows that I often say we live at the mercy of our memory. Memory doesn't go away unless, the brain is injured. So we will always remember, and that memory will trigger or provoke a response, which could be reacting in a certain way, feeling something within ourselves and responding to it. So I don't think anyone changes completely, because we live at the mercy of our memory. But what we can get better at, and I have had the privilege, I'll call it a privilege because it's such a unique role, as you know, when you're working with people and you're supporting them. As a therapist working with someone who is narcissistic, it's a privilege to watch someone find the courage, to go into the deep, dark places that are scary and ugly and vulnerable and really work through, and there's a lot to say about what working through means, but work through to a place where they begin to adapt their coping responses. So what does that look like? It means that they can get to a place where they are triggered less, where the intensity is lower and the recovery is faster. Doesn't mean they'll never get triggered. They'll never get angry. They'll never be snarly or snarky or difficult, but they may see it faster. They may recuperate faster. So meaningful, sustainable change is possible. And it's a wonderful thing, right? For the individual, for perhaps the relationship, if they're still in one, and certainly for kids if they have them, right? They may be breaking a legacy that has gone on for generations in some cases.
Yeah, certainly in my family. Yeah. And what causes someone narcissistic or with narcissistic traits to actually want to do that work?
There's the big question. They don't often want to do that work. The ones who come in voluntarily are often coming because there's been an episode of some kind that feels unbearable, intolerable, right? They don't suffer frustration very well. They are often very poor when it comes to being uncomfortable, tolerating frustration. So, health issue, panic attack, maybe they're losing some of their fans and followers, retirement issues, losing a job. Those things might drive them into therapy. But even if it does, it's not like, oh, okay, happy day, they're going to get better. They want a quick fix. It's like, tell me what to say, tell me what to do, make this go away, give me a pill, whatever it takes. I don't want to feel this. I want to feel better. And of course, we know that's not possible. It doesn't work that way. Personalities are complicated. The journey is long. The sit is long. So you have to have leverage. And the leverage might be in the health issue. The leverage might be in the adult kids that aren't talking to you anymore. The leverage might be in a marriage where someone has said, get help or get out. I'm done. When there's leverage, there's a chance that they will come to treatment, but they have to come into a treatment that's designed to work with this very difficult personality. And they have to meet a therapist who knows how to spot it and who is sturdy enough to effectively deliver the treatment and bond with them and bring that leverage into the therapy relationship. So now they value you as the therapist. And too often, sadly, because I've traveled the world teaching therapists how to work with people with issues of narcissism, how to work with couples, how to work with partners. And therapists would much rather work with the partners than the narcissists. I get that. But they miss it. They miss it because narcissists can be charming. They miss it because it's intimidating. When you have a narcissist who is yelling at you, criticizing you, or just blaming the world and can't be responsible for anything, or shutting down, or is the martyr, the victim. Their suffering is bigger than anybody's suffering. Oh, you wouldn't understand, Marina. What do you know about suffering? My life is the life that's hard. I mean, you have no idea. You have no idea what I do, what I've done, and what I give and what I give. I mean, I'm not trying to brag, but, you get that. And you can feel just, what am I doing? So unfortunately, it really does require leverage, a good treatment approach, and a really sturdy therapist who can see it, who can spot it, and who can sit there in that posture of being able to empathically confront them, hold them accountable, take them into the deeper emotional zone where they need to work.
You're reminding me of when I didn't speak to my dad and I told him he has to go to therapy. And he did. And then the therapist complained to me that he didn't let her say one word. And I was like, well, exactly. I think this is the point.
That's right.
So it's not my job, it's yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are some of the coping strategies for people who decide to stay for whatever reason?
Yeah, very often, if their narcissistic partner is refusing to get help, to get professional help or any help of any kind, it's sad, right? Because again, we can predict a little bit about what the future looks like. But what I often say is the kind of one day at a time thinking, right? You wake up and you take your inventory and you look at yourself and you say, today I choose to stay. Make sure it's coming from a thoughtful place. So it's always about, are you making this choice based on a thoughtful, rational decision? Is this coming from your wise adult self? Or is this coming from a reaction to, oh my God, I can't be alone. Who's going to want me? It's never going to work. Oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I'm such a loser. If it's coming from a reactive place and not a place of thoughtful choice, then we have to look a little bit more at those triggers and try to get to that healthy platform. They may still choose to stay for maybe very legitimate practical reasons, but every day can be another day of taking a look at the choice and deciding, do I still want to make this choice or do I want to make a different one? Do I want to begin a separation process? Do I want to even propose a possible pause in this relationship? Am I committed to staying, and therefore, how do I craft a life for myself that keeps me healthy? Carve out that little space for me, for friends, for social supports, for breathing, for meditating, for exercising, for my own work and hobbies. Can I do that, in this relationship? And some people do, some people do. And we might think, those listening might think, well, but why? It's crazy. Get out there and have a real life and a real relationship. 4 decades with someone and a whole family of children and grandchildren, not always so easy to step outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But one thing I do say to them always is you don't have to be angry all the time in order to justify your position. And I think one of the problems in treatment these days is there's a lot of emphasis. And believe me, I know there's a value to anger. Anger is a valuable emotion. We have to express it. We have to ventilate it. We have to get it out. And it's hard not to be angry when you're being mistreated. But you don't have to walk around angry all the time to justify your decision to leave or to take a pause. You don't have to be angry. Right? The best place we can get ourselves to is that place of just solid, steady conviction and using this tone to remind ourselves, no, I don't have to tolerate that. That's not okay with me. That's not acceptable. And learning and practicing how to say that to the narcissist. No, I know this is important to you, but it's rising to an intensity that doesn't feel comfortable to me. So I'm going to stop for now. Right? And step away. Stay right here because now you're with your best internal advocate. You don't have to be firing angry all the time and, wiping out your strength in your nervous system. Just have to know your truth. Speak your truth.
And how do people get to that point of it sounds like regulation around someone very volatile, very difficult to always be steady and trust me, I've tried myself. So you're really speaking to me because I was rageful for a long time and then I would become regulated, but I feel like it takes such a toll. And that term of narcissistic abuse is so real to me because it truly takes a toll on then how our patterns in the world, what we expect from people, our trauma responses, and burnout, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is, and it's not easy to get to this. When I say this level of speaking and feeling in my body as I'm speaking to you and I'm responding. And what I'm aware of as I'm doing it, and I've been sharing this with some of my community members, is the practice of the exhale when you're speaking. And so we're so used to take a breath and then speak. And I say, just start where you are and keep exhaling. Just keep exhaling as you're talking like this and notice as you're saying the words and the words are coming through that I'm not inhaling. I continue to exhale until I need a breath and I let it go. And then I work my way down. It's like working your way down the steps. But what it does in here in the nervous system is just keeps everything kind of steady. And it can override what you might be thinking, like, how could this happen again? But it's hard and it takes practice, and rehearsal. So I always say, pick up your phone, find your recording app on your phone and practice recording what it is you want to say on your own behalf. You might want to just send it to the narcissist and let them hear you because, when you write things, assigned meaning can be there. You can defend yourself all you want. The narcissist says, I know what you meant. But when you're speaking, it's a little harder to be accused of, this is not what you meant because you use your voice and you use your words. So it's a practice, right? Practice with recording, practice with your friend, the mirror, practice with a friend, with your therapist, practice, and know that it won't be perfect. It'll never be perfect because we're human and we're going to react to certain things with, what? I mean, I still do it in the treatment room. There's times I go, what? What are you saying? And then I go, whoa, wait a minute. Wow, I'm really triggered. I'm really, really triggered right now. So you can be a narrator of your experience, even with the narcissist. It's good modeling too. Wow, I'm really triggered right now. Look at that. It's going sideways for me. Let me take a moment. I got to take a moment because this isn't going to go well. And I'm not doing this dance. I don't want to do this dance anymore. And you take your moment and you close your eyes and you escort your little vulnerable self into a safe place and you come back to the conversation, or you don't. You come back later.
And that I think is also really helpful even for people dealing with divorcing a narcissist, right? And those exchanges.
Oh, so ugly, so hard.
Yeah, I have some friends going through that. So definitely going to send them this episode. The wounds that are present for people who get into relationships with narcissists, do you find that it's the same as like what they need to work on to exit? And what are those?
You mean kind of pre-existing things that have happened in their lives? Yeah, it's I always start with like no one is immune to being captivated by, the charm, the spell, the very clever ways the narcissist goes into relationship or courtship even. No one's immune to that.
It's very appealing, magnetizing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're very good at it. And they're good at it. And what's disheartening about that is so many folks will say, so it wasn't real? It wasn't real? And my response is, it can be real. It's maybe short-lived, like a toddler who loves their toy for 10 minutes and then they throw it across the room and they're looking for something else. It's not that it's not real. It's not long-lasting enough. They can't live in the land of real intimacy and emotionality for very long. It's uncomfortable for them. The mission is to get what they want, and they're very good at performance and achievement. So I want you, and I know what to do to get you, and I know what to do to win you over, and I know what to do to trick you. And they're good at that. Not because they are diabolical and want to hurt you. It's another mythology. Narcissists don't sit there going, let me see how I can hurt you. That would be really fun. No, that's a horse of a different color. The narcissist is going to do whatever it takes to win, to protect their ego, to save face, to save from shame, even if it means they have to run you over. They're going to do it. But it's not. And you might say, well, what's the difference? They're still hurting you. I think there's a difference between someone who is acting in defense of their ego, not okay, still not okay, versus someone who plots to hurt you with pleasure. And that's a different, there may be narcissism in that type too, but that's a different type.
Would that be more like sociopath?
Yeah. So, yes, the early wounds of a partner, it's not coincidental that a lot of partners who stay in these relationships or really get trampled by the narcissist. They absorb the devaluing, the doubt that's been placed in them. Things like, maybe I am a sensitive person. Maybe I am too picky. Maybe I do expect too much. Maybe I'm not sexy enough. Maybe I don't show enough interest. Maybe I am ungrateful. Maybe I'm not that appreciative. Maybe that is me. I mean, that kind of feels familiar, Wendy. I mean, that's what I was told when I was very little too. I was told that I was selfish, and I was told that I was kind of a needy kid, a little too sensitive. So maybe it's just true. Maybe that's just the truth, because, my partner goes out there and everybody thinks that he's like amazing and wonderful and giving and charming and Mr. Community person. And, so maybe it is me. So yes, to answer your question, there's so much work to be done in rewriting, reimagining, rescripting those experiences from once upon a time, to feel those needs being met, to get to that truth, right? To try to eradicate these schemas that have taken hold, that become like the filters with which someone sees the world and sees themselves in that world. And the narcissist is very good at just, kind of laying a carbon copy right over that. And now you're doubting yourself again. You've kind of lost your own identity. And sometimes it means, well, look at how you are out there in the world with others. You have friends, you have people who care about you. You are amazing when it comes to being a good parent, being a good professional, if they are working in a professional anywhere in the world. So it can't all be true. It can't be that all of you agrees with you, right? But big parts of you agree with you because you've been so sucked into something that feels very familiar to your once upon a time.
Yeah, conditioned.
Yeah.
So you talk about the healthy adult. Can you talk about that? I think that's a really important concept.
Yeah, we all have one to greater and lesser degrees. Like when someone comes into the treatment room, part of our work is to assess how much healthy adult is there, meaning how much capacity to move into a state of your wise self, your executive brain, your logical thinking, problem solving, decision making part of your brain. How well are you functioning and caring for yourself and being able to, thrive in spite of, whatever might be going on or living with a narcissist. Narcissists typically have a lot of practical, healthy adult. In that, we think of these as modes, right? They have a really strong, practical, healthy adult mode. They can get up, put themselves together, go to work, be taskmasters, be very achievement oriented. But what they're missing in that healthy adult mode is the interpersonal side of it, the emotional side of it, the what we call even the good parent part of the healthy adult. The good parent that looks out for the vulnerability of another, looks out for the vulnerability of themselves, even. So it's always about how do we fortify, what do we have to do to fortify someone's healthy adult, to help them to be more autonomous, balanced by a healthy amount of connection. And that's what we mean by healthy adult. And when I look at partners who are living in relationships with narcissists, is a lot of time spent on, but when you're in your healthy adult mode, what would that part of you say about this? So really trying to engage in dialogues between the healthier, wiser part of the self, along with this part that says, just have to give in. It's the only way to keep the peace, or it's my fault. I ask for too much. So really trying to get a sense of, how far we have to go to fortify that healthy adult to be a better caregiver to the client, to themselves, to ourselves as humans.
And how can someone bolster that part of themselves?
It's if you can separate out your most vulnerable self, if we think about ourselves in these various states, and we know there's a story, there's a once upon a time story for all of us. Think about your happy child self. Think about what were the injustices that you suffered when you were little, big and small, right? There may be traumas, there may be small t traumas. What were your curiosities and impulsivities? Can you access, doesn't have to be an absolute memory. Who remembers everything absolute? But just a sense of that's me. Sometimes photos help to bring that to life. So I always encourage people to just look at your photos. Just remember that you were little at one time. You were just a vulnerable little helpless person who was dependent, who was powerless, who had very limited power. How did you design your world so you could function? We call those modes. How did you cope? What were your coping modes? What did you do? Oh, I used to sit on the floor and eat sugar when I was upset. Oh, I used to just tuck my head under the covers and read my books with a flashlight. Oh, okay. So we look and see. I fought back. I fought nasty back, and I always got in trouble for it. We look to see, like, what were the tendencies? Some of that's biologically driven. Some of that might be mimicry. But what was the coping style? What were the ones that you've carried with you right into your adult life that are now defeating you? And how much healthy adult is there that can tell the difference? That can say, that's old. That's part of an old story. Oh, yeah, there I am. Oh gosh, I'm agreeing again, even though I don't want to agree. I said yes when I wanted to say no. Look at that. I just did that again. Wow. So it's developing awareness, becoming more mindful. What does it smell like? What does it sound like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like inside of you when you're in that mode? So you can spot it more readily and run some interference through your healthy adult self, who, notice I sit up, who's up here, right? Looking and watching, going, no, that's you people pleasing again. You don't need to do that anymore. That was once upon a time. You don't have to do that now.
Mm-hmm. I love that. How can someone identify narcissistic people around? I feel like when that door opened for me, I can kind of just see it. I've never noticed it or seen it before. Yeah. How can we do that?
How do you know when you're in the space with a narcissist? Well, the air gets really thin. There's not much air to breathe. They take it all up. They kind of ask questions but don't listen to the answers.
Or they don't really ask, right?
Or they don't even ask, although some of them are good at knowing how to ask, but they're not really listening to your answers. They're just looking for the next opportunity to talk about themselves. They may be very witty and charming, so beware and notice how long does it go on before they begin to turn the attention over to you. And when you do share something with them, when you do have the little moment where you can say, yeah, it's been really hard. I lost my dog and it's been pretty heartbreaking. And they go, yeah, that must be really rough. I mean, I had a guy at work who, had a dog and, he used to talk about that dog all the time. And man, it's like all he talked about was that dog. It used to drive us crazy. So he was so distracted by the dog, even brought the dog to work sometimes. And what? So there's a lot of that too. It's not that, let me debunk one more myth, Marina. It's not that the narcissist cannot be empathic. They have a very underdeveloped capacity, and partly because they are so busy attending to their ego, attending to approval. What is the audience thinking of me? How am I doing? How am I performing? How am I showing up? What are you thinking? There's so much shame in the belly and so much fear of losing that audience, that adulation, that attention and appreciation that the covert types are always looking for, that reassurance, that they're not able to go inside your world. They're not looking in your world. They don't even know their own world. They don't even know what's driving their bus. They're just
All
reacting.
like surface
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. All surface, all reactivity, all very learned habitual patterns. But they don't even have an acquaintanceship with their own self on the inside. So I always say it's an inside-out approach. They have to go in before they're going to be able to step into your skin and know what it feels like to be you.
So fascinating. What is the relationship? You mentioned shame, and I was just going to ask you about shame. Shame and grandiosity, like how do those two function?
Well, you think of shame as being this experience that is unbearable. And in so many cases, when you've been raised to believe that you are special, chosen, as many of them are, when you've been raised in the more vulnerable ones, not necessarily, they may grow up just sort of realizing that no one's really going to be there for you and you're on your own and I've got to make my way. So they develop this kind of very premature hyper-autonomy. Most of them have just enough capacity or they're highly gifted. And so they end up becoming successful, or they end up at least being able to take care of themselves in a practical way. But they don't learn that capacity for really attuning, engaging, connecting, because they were taught that that's shameful, that that's weak, that that's unnecessary, that that has no value. And so they carry this, shamed child who may have been told, you're my prince, or you're my princess. And the other caregiver or someone else saying, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough, try harder. It's a very confusing and chaotic message that lives in the system that gets coded in shame. And so the grandiosity is, it's a part of a masquerade, right? They grow into
It's like covering the shame, basically.
It's all a compensation for feeling insecure and feeling shameful at the core. And they'll laugh at that. If they were watching this episode, they go, ridiculous. Don't have shame at the core. It's ridiculous. I had a perfectly fine childhood. It's a lot of work to dig down deep and find that, that deep shame and vulnerability.
Yeah, it's a very vulnerable part of us to touch into.
Indeed.
And they're terrified of vulnerability, right? So it's all
Indeed.
biggest fear. Would you say it's their biggest fear is vulnerability, intimacy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to be in that world.
Yeah. And I feel like also I've heard this and I feel like that's so true. You don't really feel like it's a person. Like you don't feel like you really know them, or there's a real deep connection, or you can even describe, what do I love about this person, like the profound qualities you love about them. It's kind of almost hard to answer that.
Yeah. Yeah. Except that sometimes you get moments, which is why we have trauma bonding, another famous internet term, because they show you something. Back in the day when I worked in domestic violence in the 80s, we just called that, the cycle of violence, with the honeymoon phase and then the, another outburst or another rupture or abuse in the cycle. Now we call it trauma bonding. And it makes sense to me. You can get locked into this traumatic cycle of something terrible happened. Oh, all of a sudden it's fine, and he's sweet and she's sweet or loving, and it's good. Maybe I did something good. Maybe that's how I have to behave. So it comes back to my responsibility again as the offended party, and I have the power to fix this, which is a nice thought, except you can't fix narcissists by yourself. You may be able to inspire them a little bit. You may have some influence if they're not too severe on the spectrum, but most of the time it requires professional help.
Yeah. I think my last question is, how has this work shaped you?
It's rewarding. It's frustrating at times, very frustrating at times, but it's also, I feel like it really is a very unique privilege to be able to watch people, whether it's the narcissist or it's the partner, it's the couple working together on this. They're brave, the bravery, the investigation into a life where it's scary, and we go to hard places and figure things out and kind of rewire the way we look at the world so that it flows differently. The choreography changes, and that doesn't happen a lot, and it doesn't happen enough because it is so hard. So you learn to kind of manage your expectations, but it can still be quite rewarding, to escort somebody through that experience.
Yeah, I bet. Wendy, is there anything else you want to add that I haven't asked you?
Actually, not that I can think of at the moment, Marina. Your questions really have been lovely and helpful and smart, and I think pretty comprehensive. So
that's awesome.
Probably by the time I walk away, I'm going to go, ooh, that would have been
something.
There's something, but not at the moment, no.
Okay, well, thank you. And how can people work with you? Do you do any one-on-one work, like in addition to your book? How can people find you and work with you?
Spend a lot of my time teaching and supporting and consulting, and making recommendations to trusted colleagues that I've also trained. So you can reach me at my website, which is disarmingthenarcissist.com. You can reach me at my email, which is wendy.behary@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. This was so insightful. Thank you.
I appreciate it.